Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am sharing my process video for my last 3 Christmas cards for this year. The technique I'm using, or one of the products that I'm using more likely, is alcohol ink on acetate, and I don't actually create this in this video, but I will put a link to that video in the description box below so you can see exactly how I made the acetate. I'm going to start by die cutting using my Kaisercraft DD216 Scribble Star and also this set of 3 Christmas trees. I'll put links to them in the description box below if I can find them. I did see those Christmas trees, somebody was selling them on one of the buy, swap and sell craft pages. Anyway, I've cut them in a gold card that has a sticky back. So I've cut 3 of the stars and 1 of each of the Christmas trees. I'm now peeling the back off and sticking it onto the acetate sheet, or transparency, or whatever you like to call it, that I have added the alcohol inks to. And as I said, I will put a link in the description box to that process video on how I added that alcohol ink to the acetate. Once I have them all attached to the acetate, I go ahead and fussy cut around the edge of each of the shapes. I've created my own card bases, as I always do. These are 5 inches square and I have created them from 240 GSM smooth white cardstock. I'm cutting a piece of plain red paper now that is 4 3/4 inches square. Now I'm going to cut a piece of white cardstock. This is the same cardstock that I made my card bases out of, but I'm going to cut this one so that it's 4 1/2 inches square. So you can see here how my layers are going to sit. I'm going to make a little strip to go across the top of my card for my stars to hang off of. So now I'm cutting a piece of the acetate 1 inch wide, and I'm going to use that piece of gold cardstock that's already cut. I think it's about 3/8 of an inch wide, and that is going to be attached in the middle of that 1 inch piece of acetate. I used my art glitter glue to attach the gold strip to the centre of the acetate, and then I trimmed it down to 4 1/2 inches. I used my black Versa colour ink cube to ink around the edge of the layers for my card, so that's the red and the white cardstock. I played around with the placement of my elements, and once I was happy with where they were going to go, I used my art glitter glue to attach them to my card front. I used a fine black pen to draw the line from the gold panel down to the stars, which is what my stars are hanging from, but I thought it needed more, so I went over it with a Sharpie to make it darker and thicker. Then I drew some little bows on the gold strip. The sentiments for these cards come from Uniquely Creative. They're in one of their cut apart sheets from one of their Christmas collections. So I'm going to trim it down so that it's fairly close to the greeting. Because it's a heavy black background, I didn't want it to be too large. So I'm trimming that down, and then I'm going to mat that onto some of the same red paper that I used for my layer. Before I attach it to the card, I add a layer of scrap chipboard to the back of it. I wanted those bows to stand out a little more, so I have some watered down black acrylic paint in this Fineline bottle. So I'm just going to use that to draw those bows in so that they're a bit darker and stand out a little more. So there we have our first card for today. So now we're going to move on to card number 2. My layers for this card come from this Paper Rose paper pack. It's called Black and White Christmas. I bought it last year. I think it was last year's model. And these papers can actually be foiled, so you can foil all those black sections of your card if you wanted to, like with your mink or your laminator or whatever you use to heat foil. I'm not going to foil them for this card, but it's something that I do want to try in the future. Now I'm going to trim each of those down. I'm going to have a dark, a light, a dark. So the first dark layer is going to be 4 3/4 inches square. The light layer is 4 1/2 inches square, and the top dark layer is 4 1/4 inches square. All of these measurements will be on my blog, and I will put a link to my blog post in the description box below if you're interested in seeing more detail about these cards. I also cut a piece of white cardstock that was 2 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I wanted that to sit my Christmas trees on so that they would stand out nicely. I'm going to use the same sticky backed gold paper that I used to die cut with, and I'm going to cut 2 strips that are 1/2 inch by 5 inches. I attach those strips of gold paper to the top and bottom of my white cardstock panel. Now that I have all of my layers ready, I'm going to attach them to my card front. I've inked around the edges of each of the papers and attached double-sided tape to the back of them, and this is what I'll use to attach them to my card front. Now I'm going to use my art glitter glue to attach my Christmas trees to that white panel that runs through the centre front of my card. I attach the 2 outside trees first and then centre the middle one between them. I thought about adding a sentiment to the front of the card, but I decided that it didn't really need it. I thought it was quite obvious with the ho 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 and the Christmas trees, just exactly what the card was for. So there we have card number 2. Okay, card number 3. For this card I used the same red paper that I used on the first card, and I trimmed a piece down to 4 3/4 inches square. I also trimmed a piece of white cardstock to 4 1/2 inches square. I have a piece of scrap acetate here. It's about 4 inches square. Now I'm going to cut some of that acetate that I've coloured with the alcohol ink, and I'm going to cut strips of that are about 1/4 inch wide. Now I'm going to use my art glitter glue to attach those pieces of coloured acetate to the clear acetate, and I'm going to leave a little gap in between each strip, probably about 3/16 of an inch, so not quite as wide as the strips of colour. I used my Spellbinder's standard circle dies to cut a circle from the acetate and also a slightly larger circle from Gold Cardstock. I also used my Cuttlebug embossing folder that's covered with the small baubles to emboss that piece of white cardstock that I had cut previously. Now I'm going to use my Versacolour black ink cube to ink around the edge of the papers. I used my art glitter glue to attach my acetate to the gold circle. Then I attach my red paper to the front of my card base. To make my bauble look like it's hanging from the top of the card, I'm going to use a piece of this black crochet cotton. I'm going to add a little dab of glue and attach it to the front of that embossed piece of white cardstock, and then I'm going to fold it over the top and attach it at the back using a piece of sellotape. Now I'm going to attach my acetate circle. I'm going to make a little topper for my bauble using the same gold cardstock that I mounted the acetate onto. I'm just going to cut that by hand. It's not very even, but the idea is there. I stuck the little topper over the crochet cotton, and then I attached that panel to the red panel on the front of the card. The sentiment once again comes from the uniquely creative greeting sheet. I've cut it apart. Now I am going to trim this down, mat it on some of the red paper and attach it to the front of the card. I did add a little bit of chipboard to the back of that greeting before I attached it to the card front. And there we have the third card for today. Now don't forget, I'm going to put a link below to the video that shows how I created that alcohol ink acetate piece. Pop over and check that out, I'm sure you'll love it. And yeah, thank you for joining me here for my video today, and I hope you can join me for my next video.